I'm Dr. Lee, and this says MBC 201, Unit 1 lecture. This is the Anatomy and Physiology course, Part 1, and we will be discussing the respiratory system during this presentation. As I mentioned, I'm Dr. Lee. I'm the CEO and founder and developer of the Medical Interpreting and Translating Institute. I'm a native of Panama and I speak fluently Spanish, and I was also certified by the Language Testing International as fluent in Spanish. Back when I was the director of Grady Health System, the interpreter program was part of my department, and we sought out to qualify and train all of our interpreters. And because of our efforts, we were nationally renowned throughout the entire nation. And that is what birthed the desire to replicate those same results nationwide through NETIO. So, and also in 2010, I was the first chair of the National Board of Certification for Medical Interpreters, as I was a subject matter expert for the certification exam and a member of the work group with the IMA work group when we were developing the exam. So that's just a little bit about myself. Now, the objectives of this presentation are to identify the organs and other structures of the respiratory system. We're also going to define and spell the word parts, build and analyze the medical terms using the parts. We will also define, pronounce, and spell the disease and disorder, diagnostics, surgical, and complementary terms for the respiratory system. We will interpret the meanings of abbreviations and read medical documents and interpret them with the medical terminology contained in them. Now, the function of the respiratory system is to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide between the atmosphere and our body cells. The process is called respiration. External respiration or breathing is when oxygen passes from your lungs to your capillaries, and carbon dioxide passes from your capillaries back into the lungs to be expelled. Internal respiration is where the body cells take on oxygen from the blood, and it gives it back carbon dioxide, which is then transported back to the lungs. So here you're going to see some of the organs that are part of the respiratory system. So you have the nasal cavity, you have the nose, obviously, then you have the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, the trachea, the bronchus, the alveoli, the bronchioles, the right and left lung, and the diaphragm. Now, some of the structures of the nasal passages and throat are here. You'll see the nasal canal, the pharynx, the larynx, and then the lower respiratory tract, that's the upper respiratory tract. In the lower respiratory tract, you have the trachea, the bronchi, and the lungs. Now, the respiratory system, as I mentioned, is comprised of various organs. So the first one is the nose, and that lines with mucous membrane and fine hairs and acts as a filter to moisten and warm the entering air. The pharynx or throat serves as a food and air passageway. The adenoid or lymphoid tissue is located behind the nasal cavity. Tonsils are lymphoid tissue located behind the mouth. The larynx or voice box is the location of the vocal cords, and the epiglottis is the flap of cartilage that automatically covers the opening of the larynx during swallowing and keeps food from entering the larynx. Now, the trachea is a passageway for air to the bronchi. Now, bronchus is one of the two branches from the trachea, which conducts air into the lungs, where it divides and subdivides. And this is referred to as the bronchial tree. Bronchioles are the smallest subdivision of the bronchial tree. The alveolus is the air sacs at the end of each of the bronchioles, and is where the oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged through alveolar walls and capillaries. So this is a great graph that shows the bronchioles and the alveoli. So you have the alveolar sac, and within it you have the alveolar pores and alveolar duct. And then you can see where the capillaries are interchanging, right? Clean air versus oxygen versus carbon dioxide. So you have the oxygenated blood going to the pulmonary vein, and that's in the red. And then you have the deoxygenated blood that is going from the pulmonary artery, okay? And then you have the terminal bronchiole and covered with smooth muscle that carries these different, that supports the different alveolar sacs. Now we have two lungs. These are sponge-like organs in the thoracic cavity. You have the right lung that has 3 lobes and the left lung has 2 lobes. Then you have the pleura. These are serous membrane covering each of the lungs and lining the thoracic cavity. The diaphragm is the muscular partition that separates the thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity, and it also aids in breathing. And the mediastinum is the space between the lungs. Now let's look at some types of diagnostic procedures. So you can have radiography, and that's X-ray images of the internal organs using ionizing radiation. Nuclear medicine scans are scans using radioactive material to determine the functional capacity of an organ. You can have an ultrasound, which is a sonogram or echogram, using high-frequency sound waves to create an image of body organs. And you have computed tomography, which is a CT scan, computerized images of body organs in slices horizontally. And then you have the magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI scans, and that gives information about the body's biochemistry by placing the patient in a magnetic field. You can have endoscopy, which are endoscopes, which are lighted, flexible instruments used for visual examination of a hollow organ or body cavity. You can do laboratory testing, such as diagnostic procedures performed on specimens such as blood, tissue, or sputum and urine. And you can do also pulmonary functional tests, which are diagnostic tests performed to determine lung function. So one of these little tests could be a pulse oximetry, and it basically just tests the pulse level in your body. And a spirometer is a testing device where you blow in and it tests your lung capabilities, your breathing capabilities. And that is the end of this particular presentation. Thank you.